My name is Robert Sawmast. I'm here today to talk about something very important that relates to the history of the Urantia book, or more appropriately, something that applies to how it was handled after its birth in the 1950s. It's really meant for people that are familiar with the book and understand some of its history. In particular, I want to try and help people that may be coming to know the Urantia book and come into the community and witness what me and many other people have noticed, which is a kind of an odd movement that isn't really like other spiritual communities. A lot of people are probably and rightfully turned off by the lack of brotherhood and by the overly intellectualized atmosphere that surrounds this revelation. Many of those people wind up leaving, not finding the camaraderie and the brotherhood, sisterhood feeling, and also notice that they can't get any kind of a project off the ground, that people are unwilling and often confrontational about it. In order for you to understand, and I do want to mainly appeal to people that will be coming in the future, because I've come to understand that the old timers, the people that have been studying this book for decades, are mainly set in their ways and are pretty likely to stay that way unless I can convince them otherwise. What I'm going to tell you tonight is going to shock some of you. It shocked me. It's taken me 15 years to sort out all this. What happened was I came into this community and I noticed that there was not only a hesitation, but actually a confrontational attitude about anybody that wanted to do anything as a group or do anything at all. And it remained a mystery to me all throughout these years, going on 25 years now, 27 years. And about 15 years ago, I decided to study this field more closely, to really get the truth scalpel out and make an incision and see where the cancer started. The more I studied, the more I read, the more the road led back to the very beginning of this movement, in particular with Dr. Sadler and something that was published called a publication mandate. If you're not familiar with this book at all, it is called The Fifth Epical Revelation to Humanity. In some time around 1911, a wife of a man who has never been identified and is simply called the sleeping subject, became alarmed because her husband was talking in his sleep, and he was saying some very interesting, strange things. She became very concerned. She called a man by the name of William Sadler, a self-taught psychotherapist or psychiatrist, and he began listening to these ramblings of this man in his sleep and became increasingly interested in what was being said, because what he was saying was of a profound nature. Over the years, and this goes actually into decades of recording this man's voice, taking notes on it, compiling it, and eventually it became a 2,096 page tome called the Urantia book that was first published in 1955. For whatever reason, he started something called the Urantia Foundation, and this organization began to not only limit the growth of this revelation by publishing few copies and deciding who should or who shouldn't get it, but actually sued people in court, driving them to poverty simply because they decided to publish the book in a CD-ROM or some kind of a digital format at the very beginning of the digital age. This was the Mahara case. It caused a huge scandal, and it pretty much destroyed the communal, fraternal feeling within this community, and it never really recovered. Nobody really understood why they were doing this, but as my research showed, and as I will be proving to you in the course of the next few minutes, it all stems from this spurious document called a publication mandate. We're going to be reviewing it, and I'm going to show you how what these short 6 paragraphs said shaped the attitude and the behavior of this community for the next 7 years. The Urantia Foundation lost the copyright to the Urantia book. I believe in the late 90s there was a huge fiasco surrounding it, but it literally had to be torn away from them. The Urantia Foundation of today is very different from the Urantia Foundation of those days. And I do want to say before I begin that I very much appreciate and I want to commend all the different organizations that have worked on making this book more available, translating and compiling of all the work they've done over the last 70 years. What I'm doing tonight is not to criticize, but really to get to the beginning of it all, the source of the problems, and to see if there is a solution. We're going to start by reading this publication mandate and seeing why it brought us to where we are today. 6 short paragraphs is all it is. It starts saying, we regard the Urantia book as a feature of the progressive evolution of human society. It is not germane to the spectacular episodes of epical revolution, even though it may be apparently time to appear in the wake of one such revolution in human society. This first part is very interesting. There is no mention of an epical revolution in the Urantia book itself. I'm not sure exactly what they're meaning by it. It continues, the book belongs to the era immediately to follow the conclusion of the present ideological struggle. That will be the day when men will be willing to seek truth and righteousness. When the chaos of the present confusion has passed, it will be more readily possible to formulate the cosmos of a new and improved era of human relationships. And it's for the better order of affairs on earth that the book has been made ready. Basically what it's saying is that the 5th epical revolution, or the Urantia revelation, is designed for some other time, not now. This was a very interesting, eye-opening revelation for me to read this, because it directly contradicts, before I even move on to the other paragraphs, it contradicts what the revelation itself says about its timing. But let's continue. But the publication of the book has not been postponed to that possibly somewhat remote date. An early publication of the book has been provided so that it may be in hand for the training of leaders and teachers. Its presence is also required to engage the attention of persons of means who may be thus led to provide funds for translations into other languages. Now this document is from 1952, 3 years before the book was actually published and became available for people to read. So what the second paragraph is saying is that the revelation is for the future, but it's being given an early preview so it can teach the spiritual leaders and also do some fundraising for translations. This is a very strange statement, but let's continue. You who have dedicated your lives to the service of the book and the brotherhood can little realize the import of your doings. You will doubtless live and die without fully realizing that you are participating in the birth of a new age of religion on this world. So, the brotherhood is apparently unknowingly giving birth to a new age of religion, but the book is not meant for this age. It's meant for some time in the future. Continuing, the future is not open to your mortal comprehension, but you will do well to diligently study the order, plan, and methods of progression as they were enacted in the earth life of Michael when the Word was made flesh. You're becoming actors in an ensuing episode, when the Word is made book. Great is the difference in these dispensations of religion, but many are the lessons which can be learned from the study of the former age. So this fourth paragraph is telling us that we should study the life of Jesus to learn how things proceeded with his revelation, because this is really just a subsequent revelation. Those of you that don't know, Jesus is considered the fourth revelation. Fifth paragraph, you must again study the times of Jesus on earth. You must carefully take note of how the kingdoms of heaven was inaugurated in the world. Did it evolve slowly and unfold naturally? Or did it come with a sudden show of force and with spectacular exhibition of power? Was it evolutionary or revolutionary? So what we're being told in this fifth paragraph is that since Jesus' religion grew slowly, so should the Urantia revelation or the Urantia book grow slowly. Sixth paragraph, you must learn to possess your souls in patience. You're in association with the revelation of truth, which is part of the natural evolution of religion on this world. Over rapid growth would be suicidal. The book is being given to those who are ready for it long before the day of its worldwide mission. Thousands of study groups must be brought into existence, and the book must be translated into many tongues. Thus will the book be in readiness when the battle for man's liberty is finally won, and the world is once more made safe for the religion of Jesus and the freedom of mankind. This last paragraph, one of the most interesting, is telling us that rapid growth of the revelation would be disastrous and even suicidal. So for now, all we're supposed to do is to study in study groups, translate the book into all the languages of the earth, and publish it for those people, the spiritual leaders, who will be studying this until this future time, long in the future, when the world will be ready for the Urantia book and safe for its publication in a broader context. This document pretty much formed the mentality of this community. It was read twice, once in 1952 and once in 1955. The book had already been done, compiled, and was ready to be translated, published for the first time in 1955. Basically, it's saying, okay, so the book is here, it's been compiled, it's ready to be published for the first time. You can actually take this book home for the first time, but it's not ready for a general prime time audience. This is just for a few people. So this resulted in putting off any marketing that was strictly forbidden. It had a very limited publication. We were to introduce this revelation to people on a one-to-one basis based on their a person's desire to get to know this revelation better. And we were to limit its growth and to stop anyone from doing otherwise, since it would be quote-unquote suicidal. Now, when I first saw this, and I've read it over and over again, I don't know how many dozens of times, I was struck not only by the fact that it disagrees with the Urantia revelation itself, but also because it contradicts it. It goes against it. For instance, right in paper 2:710, we're told that the religious challenge of this age is to those far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight who will dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy of living out of the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. So if they're telling us that this is what we're to do in this age, how can this revelation be for some other age? Paper 10246, revealed religion, that would be the Urantia book, is the unifying element of human existence. Revelation unifies history, coordinates geology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, and psychology. Paper 103-612. Mortal man lacks the concept of Urantia mind and material. And revelation is the only technique for atoning for this deficiency in the conceptual data which man so urgently needs in order to construct a logical philosophy of the universe and to arrive at a satisfying understanding of his sure and settled place in the universe. Faith and reason, unaided by moda, cannot conceive and construct a logical universe. So again, we hear that revelation is something that's needed for today. It balances, it sorts, and without it, there is no growth. But in the publication mandate itself, we're being told that the Urantia book as a revelation is not needed. That the world is going to just evolve all on its own, and that this revelation is to be held on reserve for some future time. Again, contradicting what this revelation itself says. Paper 10141. Any cosmology presented as part of revealed religion is destined to be outgrown in a very short time. So if the cosmology in this book is to be outgrown in a very short time, how can it be for the future? Paper 196-12. The time is ripe to witness the figurative resurrection of the human Jesus from his burial tomb amidst the theological traditions and the religious dogmas of 19 centuries. So if the time is right, and the time is right today, how can this book be for the future? And if it is written for a time in the future, wouldn't they have left out 19 centuries? Because they're saying that the time is ripe now, 19 centuries after he was here. That was actually 100 years ago. So they're saying that the time is ripe, the time was ripe 100 years ago. How could this be for the future then? Paper 9221. Religion is the most rigid and unyielding of all human institutions, but it does tardily adjust to changing society. Eventually, evolutionary religion does reflect the changing mores, which in turn may have been affected by revealed religion. So we're told that it's revelation or revealed religion that actually affects the masses, and it's that pressure on the public mores, on the beliefs and attitudes of the general public, that forces human institutions and evolutionary religions to adapt and grow and evolve. None of these quotes that I read you would ever say to someone that this religion, that this revelation is for some time in the future. It's very particular about the fact that revelations are adapted and written for the time when they are being expressed, when they are being given to the world, and that they age very quickly. And because they've been written for the people of that generation, it has to work for that period. That's the opposite of what this publication mandate told this community for the last 70 years, which is that this revelation is for some time in the future, and all you're supposed to do right now is read, translate, and study. Basically the role of a scribe, because that's what they did. Make copies, translate, and read, study. This really sent me on a journey of discovery, because I couldn't accept this publication mandate as being authentic simply because it disagrees and contradicts what the actual revelation itself says. And that started me on a journey to find out, where did this document come from? Who is the author? Why is it written this way? Why does it differ from the revelation itself? And that's what led me to Dr. William Sadler, a self-trained psychiatrist who was the man that the sleeping subject's wife called when she became alarmed at her husband's unusual nighttime activity which was to say these profound things. When he woke up, he didn't know anything about it. He didn't remember. He was bothered by the whole thing. We still don't know who he is. And this wife chose to call this man. And for these 7 years, it's, we all, none of us, or most of us, were not alive when these things were happening. This started in 1911. So we're just going by hearsay, and of course you're electrified and shocked by the revelation itself, sometimes blinded by how amazing and advanced it is. And we just become a bunch of nodding heads. Well, sure, yeah, Dr. Sadler was there, and the wife called him, and we're given the narrative, the story. And we weren't there, so how are we supposed to know if it's true or not? Why should we even question it? Most people are too busy reading the book itself. And they just don't question it, and they keep going. But this publication mandate caused me to go back and really do an in-depth search of who these people were and why this happened. As I started to study more of the writings of Dr. Sadler, I discovered some unusual and disturbing things about the character of the man. And again, I'm not here to judge. These people are all dead. I'm not here to talk ill about anybody. But what I want to show you is that this was a spiritually blind man. And that's the only reason I'm going into these things. In his book, published in 1918, called The Longheads and the Roundheads, chapter 11, we hear him saying that as a nation, we're beginning to awake from our dream. I think we're beginning to realize that the Alpine and Mediterranean races are not at once assimilable into the American body politic. We're even beginning to appreciate that the round-headed German does not readily fit into our program as the long-headed German. In this connection, it should be borne in mind that we have a large population in America of very high class, which borders on the roundhead when it comes to actual measurements, but which represents a blended stock. Some of our best Irish stock in head measurements approach the roundheads, but they are so thoroughly Nordicized, that is, they have such that mixture of the Nordic strain of the British Isles, that they are really more Nordic than Alpine. Neither are we able immediately to absorb into our civilization and gracefully fit with our institutions. The more marked specimens of the Mediterranean race, even though they happen to be of the long-headed type. At the close of this war, it behooves the American people thoroughly to reconsider the doctrine of the melting pot and to revamp the immigration laws in accordance with our experience in the present World War. This would have been in World War I he's talking about. The black man deserved his freedom, but it has taken the white people of America almost half a century to wake up to the fact that more or less political freedom, a little education, good clothes, and ability to speak and write English and go to church has not been able to transform a Negro into a white man or even into a black man with anything like equal powers and prerogatives of citizenship. And we're going to have similar experiences in this country with our Polish and Russian Jews and other Balkan immigrants. Chapter 12 says, whosoever has the characteristics of the Teutonic race is superior. All the dark people are mentally inferior because they belong to the passive races. So, again, without getting into the mindset of this man, my only point is that he is seeing the world with material eyes. The man has no spiritual insight whatsoever. He's judging the value of a human being based on the shape of his head, which was ridiculous to even people in his time. A lot of people protested his writings while he was going about traveling to other countries, encouraging the American soldiers to fight while he's at home writing books, basically a 19th century episode of Archie Bunker that just writes better. So basically what he's saying that the blacks, Mexicans, the Polish, the Jews, the dark races, even though they might have a long head, as opposed to a roundhead, should not be allowed in the country. They should not be allowed to mix. He's encouraging people to revamp the immigration laws in accordance with our experience. Again, my only point is that this guy was not a faith son. He was not spiritual. These writings, like for instance this book that came out in 1918, were actually the books that were read by the Germans later and became part of the reason that they started to persecute based on race. And also, you've probably seen those old movie reels of the Germans measuring people's heads, the length and the width, to figure out if they're long heads or round heads and whether they're fit to live. These are the types of books written by Americans, and it's well known, if you research you will see, that were read by the Germans and formed the nucleus of what later became that horrific World War II episode. So my point is, why would the revelators, the celestials and angels, give this book to a spiritually blind, racist man? How is that possible? That compelled me to search further and ask questions about things that most of us don't really question. We just believe the hearsay and never question it again. The common notion is that the celestials gave this book to Sadler. But as I thought about it, why would they give it to this man in particular? And furthermore, who says that they give a revelation to anybody? In particular, I want to show you a couple of quotes from the Urantia book, because the notion is that, well, the universe somehow got this sleeping subject's wife to call Sadler. But that's not what the revelation teaches. In paper 113.5.1, we hear that angels do not invade the sanctity of the human mind. They do not manipulate the will of mortals. Under no circumstances do these angels interfere with the free action of the human will. Neither angels nor any other order of universe personality have power or authority to curtail or abridge the prerogatives of human choosing. Paper 110.2.1. Under no circumstances do even the divine monitors ever take advantage of you in any way, arbitrarily influence you in your choices and decisions. The adjuster, the fragment of God within you, is always, quote unquote, subservient to your will. Paper 5.6.8. No being, force, creator, or agency in all the wide universe of universes can interfere to any degree with the absolute sovereignty of the mortal free will. This is something that you hear again and again in the Urantia book about the sanctity of human free will, and how no one of any order, under any circumstance, is allowed to interfere with it. So if that's the case, then we can't say that they somehow coerced the sleeping subject's wife to call Sadler. Based on the quotes I just read to you, no one could have influenced the wife to call Dr. Sadler. It was her free choice. What's more, we're further assured in this, in the fact that this woman, listening to these profound things that were coming out of this man during his sleep, was obviously not enlightened, not a seer, unlike her husband, who we're told was a very advanced spiritual being. His wife was not. How do we know that? Well, he's saying these profound things in his sleep, and the wife doesn't call an author, doesn't call a spiritual leader, doesn't call any enlightened person, doesn't take notes, doesn't understand that what she's hearing is profound. How do we know? Because who does she call? She calls a psychiatrist, someone who's trained to help people with mental defects, with mental problems. This, my brothers and sisters, can only be interpreted in one way, and there are no two ways about it. She called Dr. Sadler of her own free will, and she called the psychiatrist obviously because she thought her husband was going insane or had some mental problems, which means that she was spiritually blind herself. There is no other way. If I read the Urantia book to you, read one of these quotes that we're so fond of, would your first instinct be to call a psychiatrist to help me out? No, it wouldn't. The only people that would do that are spiritually blind people who simply don't understand what they're hearing and think of it as mere gibberish. So no one chose Sadler except a spiritually blind wife of the sleeping subject. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out, but we just gloss over these things because we just are used to listening to the hearsay and just nodding our head and moving on. But when we scratch beneath the surface, a different story appears. Now, Dr. Sadler himself said that the main reason for not revealing the identity of the contact personality is that the celestial revelators do not want any human being, any human name, ever to be associated with the Urantia book. They want this revelation to stand on its own declarations and teachings. That was an actual quote from him. So the celestials don't want any human being or any human name ever to be associated with the Urantia book, which is why we don't know the name of the sleeping subject. He also said that it was the design of our unseen friends to prevent the appearance of a Urantia Apocrypha subsequent to the publication of the Urantia book. Apocrypha is defined as a work outside an accepted canon of scripture. So this would be something we would refer to as extra revelatory. So for instance, we have the gospel itself, and then we have the many books written by Paul and others after him. That would be called Apocrypha. If this is true, one has to wonder why then, in 1950, 5 years before the book was even published, Dr. Sadler set up what's known as the Declaration of Trust in 1950. You can search these online, they're all online. So in this very secular document, it's basically a corporate sounding agreement or contract. And in it, it says the Urantia trustees, the Urantia Foundation trustees, shall have the power to own, hold, manage, control, operate, care for, protect, and preserve the trust estate. That's the Urantia book itself. And to collect and receive the income and profits. This would have been at a time when they would have thought that they were sitting on a gold mine and that this book, this newest revelation, was likely to sell more copies than the Bible. And I hope I don't have to explain to most of you what happens when money and greed get hold of a human soul and what they do to that person. It basically commercialized, like the commercialized priests, commercialized something that was supposed to be a divine revelation that was given freely to humanity. In that declaration of trust, we also hear in 6.5, the trustees shall have the power and are authorized to invest and reinvest any portion or all of the subservient estate, that means the Urantia book profits, in bonds, stocks, mortgages, or other securities, in their sole judgment and discretion. In 3.3, they said to retain that this foundation and these 5 trustees were to retain the absolute and unconditional control of the possession, custody, use, and disposition of all such plates and all other media for printing and reproduction of the Urantia book and its translations. This is why they had to sue Christine Mahara when she published the Urantia book by herself and distributed it freely in a digital format. So, with one breath, Dr. Sadler saying that the Celestials don't want any human being or any human name ever to be associated with the Urantia book. And with the next breath, he's saying that me and my friends own this revelation outright. That is to do what we want, when we want, as we want. And what gave him this power? Well, it's online. You can check it out. Who told him or who told us that he has this authority? He did. He said that Macaventa, as well as an unseen Melchizedek, or unknown, we don't know, we've never heard this name, Norsen, and Gabriel, the commander of all the legions of heaven, personally came down to give control of this book to him. And he set up the foundation and became the sole owner and controller of an epical revelation. The nerve is staggering. But in case you think that's proper or it's okay and you make some kind of excuse, oh, he had to do this to control it, and other people might have come back then. There was only printing. They could have published a false version of the Urantia book and spread that book instead of the authentic. These were the excuses that we were often given. But this does not conform to what Jesus said. In paper 159-2, John, the Apostle John, was saying to Jesus, Master, a man who was teaching in your name and even claiming to be able to cast out devils. Now this fellow had never been with us, neither does he follow after us. Therefore I forbade him to do such things. Jesus said, forbid him not. How can you expect that all who will believe the gospel shall be subject to your direction? My son, in matters of this sort, it would be better for you to reckon that he who is not against us is for us. In the generations to come, many who are not wholly worthy will do many strange things in my name, but I will not forbid them. So, how come the instructions that supposedly came from the Celestials contradict and oppose what their creator, Christ Michael, Jesus on earth, recommended and asked his followers? He is telling them, I will not forbid them. So his strategy would have been vastly different. He is allowing his truth to become adapted and to move on society to society, race to race, nation to nation, adapt to those people's understanding so they can assimilate as much of it as they can. He never said that I'm going to commission you, Peter, to own and control my gospel. And if anybody says otherwise or writes otherwise, I want you to sue them to kingdom come. This never happened. In paper 141.5.1, Jesus says, James, when did I teach you that you should all see alike? I have come into the world to proclaim spiritual liberty to the end that mortals may be empowered to live individual lives of originality and freedom before God. What I require of you, my apostles, is spirit unity, and that you can experience in the joy of your united dedication to the wholehearted doing of the will of my Father in heaven. You do not have to see alike or feel alike or even think alike in order spiritually to be alike. So Jesus' own recommendation, his own religion, was not that everybody should see a particular way, do things a particular way, or even think a particular way. That we were only to be united, a spirit unity, in our different understandings, with our different backgrounds, with our different perspectives, That's what he recommended. So how could he recommend that 5 people who had not really been chosen, had not proven themselves spiritually, they were just chosen by this Dr. Sadler, who, as we said before, had been merely the man that the sleeping subject's wife called. Nobody coerced her. Nobody interfered with her free will. Nobody asked her to choose something that was not part of her free will. This is the law of the universe. They will not interfere. Once the revelation is produced, once it's in that world, there is no protection. Was there protection for the first one? Cal went astray. Was there protection for the second one? Didn't the universe know what Cal Gasha was planning for Eve? Why didn't they say something? Not one word. They allowed natural law, as is the law of the universe, even though it meant the default of their mission and untold misery for hundreds of billions of people that have lived since that time. They will not interfere in any way. They chose the sleeping subject to express the Urantia revelation. That's it. They would have known at that time that someone would eventually publish this priceless document, that someone, somewhere or another, was going to realize that this was something special, and eventually it would be published. They never asked anybody to direct it, to control it, to own it, and to tell other people how it should be done, how it should be handled, it should be translated by, where it should go, where it shouldn't go, who should market it, who should know. None of that ever happened. This was all Sadler and those original people that did the human thing. And let's face it, most people, if something like this priceless document falls on their lap, most people are probably going to do the same thing. It's mine. It's all mine. And that's exactly what happened. Why did it happen? Why did they become so obsessed with controlling this revelation? That actually isn't the revelation itself. As usual, it predicted everything that was going to happen down to a T. Paper 195-96. Primitive man lived a life of superstitious bondage to religious fear. Civilized men, modern civilized men, dread the thought of falling under the dominance of strong religious convictions. Thinking man has always feared to be held by a religion. When a strong and moving religion threatens to dominate him, he invariably tries to rationalize, traditionalize, and institutionalize it, thereby hoping to gain control of it. By such procedure, even a revealed religion becomes man-made and man-dominated. So we're told in the first sentence that primitive man lived like a bondage to religious fear. And because of that, modern civilized men have swung to the opposite extreme. They dread the thought of falling under the dominance of strong religious convictions. And because they do not want to be controlled by these strong religious convictions, the knee-jerk reaction is to do the opposite and control that truth, to become the controller. When a strong and moving religion threatens to dominate him, he tries to rationalize, traditionalize, and institutionalize it so he can control it. And institutionalize it is what they did. In 1950, they basically, this is 5 years before anybody even had this book. Up until then, they would only read certain portions of it here and there during the weekly meetings with the forum. So only a few people on Earth had ever heard even a small portion of this book until 1955. And before that, in 1950, Sadler had already made himself controller and sole owner of this epical revelation. It's almost staggering to behold the nerve of what happened here. But again, I will say again that most people, most human beings, most unenlightened human beings would probably do the same thing. And what happened is it became a commodity with a commercialized priesthood that would profit from that commodity and had vested interest to control it, to put a copyright on it, and to persecute anybody that would threaten that dominance and that control. In 97:10:7, we're told that it's difficult for religion to survive as the private practice of isolated individuals. This has ever been the error of the religious leaders. Seeing the evils of institutionalized religion, they seek to destroy the technique of group functioning. And this is something that you will run across quite a bit if you're new to the Urantia revelation and the community that surrounds it. You will be seeing this quite a bit. Most of them are coming from evolutionary religions, and they don't want anything like that ever to happen to anybody else. And so, seeing the evils of institutionalized religion, they seek to destroy the technique of group functioning. They don't want anybody to work together because their feeling is that that's just going to lead to a religion, and that religion is going to become dogmatic, and that's something that we don't want. And this is called a error of all religious leaders. We can see this going back thousands of years in the Bible. With Ezekiel, he had the same problem. So this tendency to want to control strong religious convictions instead of being controlled by them, combined with this tendency to evade group functioning because of the evils of institutionalized religion, created an environment in which we were discouraged to work together in any kind of a religious sense. And we were compelled to control it and to help these original founders to control it and not let anybody do anything that might cause a rapid growth of the Urantia book, which would become suicidal. Really? In 176:3-7, we're told by the Celestials, you are not given truth to crystallize into settled, safe, and honored forms. And that's exactly what happened. It crystallized into a settled, safe, honored forms. We're going to tell you how this thing should roll out. We control it. If you do it your way, if you do anything that's not our way, we'll sue you, we'll destroy you. And they did that for quite a number of decades. What a sorry, and this is a quote that tells you that the Celestials knew all of this was going to happen. What a sorry sight for successive generations of the professed followers of Jesus to say regarding the stewardship of divine truth. Here, Master, is the truth you committed to us 100 or 1,000 years ago. We have lost nothing. We have faithfully preserved all you gave us. We have allowed no changes to be made in that which you taught us. Here is the truth you gave us. But such a plea concerning spiritual indolence will not justify the barren steward of truth in the presence of the Master. In accordance with the truth committed to your hands, will the Master of truth require a reckoning. They knew what was going to happen. It even says the number of years it would take. What a sorry sight for future so-called believers of Jesus to say, here is the book you gave us. We've allowed nothing to be changed in it. This was really the centerpiece of the mentality of this community for its first 50 years, to stop anyone from making any changes. A man in the 1990s, Harry Mons, I believe, he published part 4 of the book by itself, and just that alone caused a lawsuit, which went on to become the reason why the foundation lost its copyright, which fulfilled another prophecy by Jesus when he said that even that which you think you have shall be taken from you. Because it never belonged to the foundation. It never belonged to Sadler. There is no custodian of the Urantia revelation, and there never was. This is just a human mentality, a human perspective on something they cannot understand. They knew all the way back then that this is exactly what would happen, that people would say, we're going to sit on it and we're going to preserve it, and here's what you gave us, Master, 100 years ago. We've allowed no changes to be made. And they called it a sorry sight. So in 1950, Sadler institutionalized this book, institutionalized and formed a church. This church didn't have a church in the normal sense, although his home has been turned into some kind of a temple. But it had a spiritual mandate, it had a sacred book, it had the instructions of Jesus, supposedly, and the celestials. It had a mission to proclaim it and spread it around the world, of course, in a very limited way. This was the church that Sadler set up. Dr. Sadler really is a poor man's version of St. Paul. Just as St. Paul took the gospel of Jesus and created Christianity based on his own opinions, based on his own perspective, which was muddled with many errors. And yet he was a great man. He was willing to die for what he did. The Christianity that is set up, even though it was a compromise and not as good as Jesus' religion, it was missing this most important part, the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Basically, the same thing happened with us. And I want people that read this in the future, maybe even after I'm gone, to know that we made the exact same mistakes as those early Christians. It became about the book instead of the religion of the book, just as it became about the story of Jesus instead of the religion of Jesus. We haven't changed all that much. In 9963, we hear that, but as religion becomes institutionalized, and remember, it became institutionalized 5 years before it was even published as a book. It was already owned, lock, stock, and barrel, controlled, with the threat of legal action and all the secular powers and institutions that were available to them, which they used quite often. But as religion becomes institutionalized, this power for good is curtailed, while the possibilities for evil are greatly multiplied. Now this quote in 9963 is really amazing. It's just 6 lines. And in this one paragraph, they describe exactly what was going to happen. Now, a lot of these people that are under the spell of Sadler's wayward institutions, they think that they're talking about evolutionary religions and the problems with the churches, and they use this quote as something like, this is why we need to control it, but it's actually talking about them. Listen to what it says. The dangers of formalized religion are fixation of beliefs and crystallization of sentiments. Okay, this thing with the foundation, and it's not just the foundation, it's the Urantia International Association and even the fellowship, even though they don't agree with everything that Sadler said or did, they are still following that mindset, this narrow path that we were put on. The dangers of formalized religion are fixation of beliefs and crystallization of sentiments, which has happened for 7 years, accumulation of vested interest with increase of secularization. That happened with the profit motive, obviously, and the secularization happened with the getting the courts involved and forming a nonprofit and using the arm of the law to persecute people. Tendency to standardize and fossilize truth. This is a no-brainer. Obviously, the whole point of most of these organizations is to fossilize the truth. Fossilize the Urantia book, never allow any changes, never allow it to be reduced or anything. Diversion of religion from the service of God to the service of the church. I'm going to show you where that happened, right in that publication mandate, as we go over it again with a more, I'm going to put that one under the X-ray for you. Inclination of leaders to become administrators instead of ministers. Right from the beginning, it was all about secretaries and vice presidents and lawyers and treasurers, no ministers. To this day, there hasn't been one minister. They were all administrators and still are to this day. Tendency to form sects and competitive divisions, that obviously happened with the fellowship. Establishment of oppressive ecclesiastical authority, that happened with them and their heavy hand in suing people left and right for not towing the line. Creation of the aristocratic chosen people attitude. We, and this happened with the foundation and the trustees saying, we and we alone know what to do with this book, and you have to follow our directions or else, because God said so. Or in this case, Sadler said so. Creation of the aristocratic chosen people attitude, fostering of false and exaggerated ideas of sacredness. That is the Urantia book itself. The Urantia book itself says that nothing short of the Father is a revelation, and yet they have created this fetishized sacred book that needs to be controlled and directed and preserved. The routinizing of religion and petrification of worship. Tendency to venerate the past while ignoring present demands. None of that's happened. Failure to make up-to-date interpretations of religion. That's a big no-no. We're not supposed to do that, remember? Interpretations of religion? No, we're not supposed to interpret. All we're supposed to do is give this book, because the book is the answer to all the world's problems. This has been the attitude. Entanglement with functions of secular institutions. We don't have to get into that. It's written all over it. It creates the evil discrimination of religious castes. We're special. We know what God wants. You don't. If you don't toe the line, if you don't do what we say, we're going to punish you. It becomes an intolerant judge of orthodoxy. It fails to hold the interests of adventurous youth and gradually loses the saving message of the gospel of eternal salvation. And all these things have happened one after another, perfectly as they described, perfectly as they predicted. The adventurous youth are not attracted to a group that wants to do nothing but read a 2,100-page tome. And their numbers have been dwindling. All we have right now are the old timers with nobody to replace them. Well, if you're watching, this is why they called it. And we fell right into the trap. In 88.210, we're told that to become fetishes, words had to be considered inspired. And the invocation of supposedly divine inspired writings led directly to the establishment of the authority of the church, in this case, the Sadler Church. 99.6.1, we're told that it's far better to have a religion without a church than a church without a religion. Here they're talking about this church that Sadler set up, and they're saying that it's better to have a religion without a church than a church without religion, because there is no religion. They're actually anti-religion. I want to go back now that you have a little better understanding of the situation we're facing, and read this publication mandate again. Because I want to show you why it is that for 70 years nobody's seen this, that it's just under the radar, you read over it, your eyes gloss over it, and you would never know that it's riddled with errors. So I'm going to read it to you again, and we're going to study those errors. The book belongs to the era immediately to follow the conclusion of the present ideological struggle. That's the first paragraph. That will be the day when men will be willing to seek truth and righteousness. When the chaos of the present confusion is past, it'll be more readily possible to formulate cosmos of a new and improved era of human relationships, besides the bad writing. This is riddled with error. The book, A Revelation, comes for that period to solve the ideological problems. It's not sent for the future time. But the publication of the book has been postponed to that possibly somewhat remote date. An early publication of the book has been provided for the teachers and for fundraising. Seriously, anybody, how was this taken seriously? 3, you who have dedicated your lives to the service of the book and the brotherhood can little realize the import of your doings. This is one of those sentences where you just, if you're not paying attention, it's just going to evade you. Who's dedicated their lives to the book and to the brotherhood? Didn't Jesus say to dedicate our lives to doing God's will and to the brotherhood of man? But you're saying that we've dedicated our lives to the service of a book, a crystallized text, and the brotherhood? That is exactly what they talked about in that section where they talk about the problems of institutionalized religions, where they tell us about the accumulation of vested interest and increase of secularization, but specifically diversion of religion from the service of God to the service of the church. And that's exactly what we're being told here that we should be doing. Dedicate our lives to the service of a book and a brotherhood. That means the people in our group. Is that what Jesus asked? No. The future is not open to your mortal comprehension, so we can't understand the future. But you will do well to diligently study the order, plan, and methods of progression, like the life of Michael when the Word was made flesh. The Word was made flesh with the life of Jesus. But the next sentence says you're becoming actors in an ensuing episode when the Word is made book. The Word of God can never be made into a book. This is a fatal flaw in this document. The Word of God, we're taught, is alive. It's living. It's the spirit within, always adapting to the person, the situation at hand. It can never be dead. It can never be crystallized. It cannot be contained in a book. That is what the revelation itself teaches. And yet here we're told that the Word is made book. So that's called fetishizing. Okay? You're turning this book. This is again what they talked about in that section about the problems of institutionalized religion. When we're told that one of the problems is the fostering of false and exaggerated ideas of sacredness. And that is the Urantia book itself. The Urantia book itself says that outside of the revelation of the Father, all revelations are incomplete. And it follows that with saying that we say that knowing that it detracts from the power of this revelation. In other words, we're telling you, frankly, that yes, this is a revelation, and yet it's not sacred. It's not perfect. Nothing short of the living Spirit of God, the actual Word of God, as it lives, it breathes through us, is sacred. So let's go back to and continue here. Great is the difference in these dispensations of religion. So this is very different from Jesus' time, but many are the lessons which can be learned from the former age. Okay, you must again study the time of Jesus on earth. Okay, you must carefully take note of how the kingdom of heaven was inaugurated in the world. Did it evolve slowly and unfold naturally, or did it come with a sudden show of force and with spectacular exhibition of power? Well, actually, the religion of Jesus grew slowly because we live in a primitive planet that doesn't understand much. Did it come with a sudden show of force and with spectacular exhibition of power? I think that getting a creator's son as a human being that cured the blind, gave hearing to the deaf, and raised the dead back to life in broad daylight can be considered a show of force with spectacular exhibition of power. The next sentence is really interesting. Was it evolutionary or revolutionary? Now, this is talking about how the Lucifer rebellion happened and how these people, these celestial beings that were supposed to help us and to help us to grow and evolve, actually decided to give this information to a people that were not ready for it. And so it's saying, was it evolutionary or revolutionary? Is this book, this revelation, is it revolutionary or is it evolutionary? You know, it's a really interesting thing that they're twisting the meaning here. And I'm going to go into the next paragraph so you'll understand what's happening. Was it evolutionary or revolutionary? You must learn to possess your souls in patience. You are in association with the revelation of truth, which is part of the natural evolution of religion on this world. Over rapid growth would be suicidal. Oh, all these people reading about truth, beauty, and goodness, my goodness, that might be suicidal. Why would that be suicidal? Suicidal for who? The book is being given to those who are ready for it long before the day of its worldwide mission. Thousands of study groups must be brought into existence, and the book must be translated into many tongues. Thus will the book be in readiness when the battle for man's liberty is finally won, and the world is once more made safe for the religion of Jesus and the freedom of mankind. When exactly has the world been safe for the religion of Jesus? You know, when they say, is it evolutionary or revolutionary, they're saying that because this revelation is meant for some other time, to expose it to today's people would be revolutionary, not evolutionary, and therefore you should not do it. But the wording here, what they're alluding to, is the rebellion. And the reason that it was revolutionary instead of evolutionary back then with the rebels is because they were teaching the highest spiritual truths, concepts of God realization and the I am, to basically Neanderthals. It was just way too advanced for those people. But we're told that the revelation is sent to a world adapted perfectly for that period. So it was not revolutionary. The expression of this revelation has always been perfectly timed for our world and is evolutionary. So by saying that it's revolutionary, it's alluding that to spread the teachings of this book is analogous to what the rebels did, which is spread the highest concepts of spiritual realization to beings that were living before the Cro-Magnons, distant Neanderthals, cavemen. Of course that was revolutionary. Is this revolutionary? No, but that's what they're alluding to. That's what they're trying to imply here. That to do it, to spread the teachings of this book, to market it, would be suicidal for some God knows what reason. Why would people reading more about truth, beauty, and goodness, learning about the true nature of God, and learning the true history of our planet, be suicidal? And it's also telling us to do it would be analogous to what the rebels did. And this is the fear that it created. And this is why the foundation and all these groups have stuck to this narrow path that has constricted us, suffocated this movement, this community, and brought it to the edge of a cliff. It's not that what these organizations did was wrong. Of course we had to publish, of course we had to translate, of course we had to spread this to people that could understand it. What's wrong is that nothing else was developed. And sometimes, especially with religion, to confine it to this narrow path, to limit its growth, can be its death. Because, as we're told in 9962 and many other places, it's the purpose of group religious activities to dramatize the loyalties of religion, to magnify the lures of truth, beauty, and goodness, to foster the attractions of supreme values, to enhance service of unselfish fellowship, to glorify the potentials of family life, to promote religious education, to provide wise counsel and spiritual guidance, and to encourage group worship. All live religions encourage human friendship, conserve morality, promote neighborhood welfare, and facilitate the spread of the essential gospel of their respective messages of eternal salvation. But we couldn't do any of those because that would be suicidal, over rapid growth. All we are to do is to make copies, translate, and study in small groups, and nothing else. And anybody that would dare do anything else is going against the mandates of the celestials and is a problem to God's will and must be stopped. And now, my friends, you understand why we are where we are. We weren't allowed to do any of those things that create a live religion that has the possibility to learn and to grow and to reach out and to help the average person. All we've done is to spread a 2,100-page tome that barely an infinitesimal small fraction of the world's population can even begin to understand, much less to read the whole thing. What you see in the Urantia community right now, the way it's set up, the way it operates, its mentality and so forth, is not representative of the Urantia papers. It's not representative of what it asks for. It's not representative of what Jesus did or what Jesus asked for. This is a man-made religion made by greedy people, I'm sorry to say it, that saw this as a possible wealth bringer, and also they wanted to control it because of the reasons that we went over before. What you see now is a wayward path, a strange exit that this community took that does not reflect anything in the revelation itself. For you to succeed, for you to stop the further restriction, the further restraining, the further suffocation of this revelation, you will have to broaden your work to include many other things besides just reading and writing and translating, especially to facilitate the spread of the essential gospel of their respective message. What is the essential gospel of the Urantia book? We're not even supposed to do that. They asked us in the revelation itself. They directly said that the religious challenge of this age is to create this essential gospel that's adapted to the generation you're giving it to. But that was a no-no, because all you're supposed to do is read, write, and translate. Do you understand where things went wrong and where you have to take it if there's going to be any kind of growth, if the essential message of this revelation is to reach the people of this world? It'll have to be made so that it's not a blinding source of light. We drop this stadium-sized floodlight on people's laps, and then we wonder why they run away in fear because it's burning hot and it's blinding. This is not how the book itself asks us to do things. Lastly, I will close it with some speculation. This publication mandate that was first read in 1952, 3 years before the book was even published, has a very troubling feeling to it. It's too slick and slippery. The way that it's tweaked the meaning of evolutionary and revolutionary, alluding that to spread this book, to spread its teachings, to change it, to modify it, to be adapted, or do anything outside of these, basic scribe rules, is an act of revolution instead of evolution. And to tie it that way to what happened with the rebellion itself is incredibly troubling. It has the feeling that it's been formulated, that it's been crafted. And although I can't prove that Caligastia had something to do with this, neither can I disprove it, because he would have had the means to do this. He can contact and he can communicate with people that love him, and he could have easily sent a mole in to somehow get this into the mindset. It would be in line with what he's done before. What he did with Eve was a suggestion of compromise that came through that man. When he was trying to throw Jesus off course in Mount Hermon, he suggested again compromises. Of course, Jesus never bit down on that. But apparently we did, because what's here is also a compromise, an easier path. You don't have to do the hard work of kingdom building. Just read, write, and translate. And it seems to be striking at the Achilles heel of human beings, the tendency to have quote-unquote ease-drifting souls, the tendency to want to control instead of be controlled by a true religion, and the tendency to stay away from group functioning. Somebody like him that would know us for so many years and know all our weaknesses could easily throw us off track the same way. And because a revelation is only good for the period that it's meant for, to say that it's for some other time and to do nothing until some uncertain, distant point in the future is essentially the same as killing it. I can't disprove it. It is a possibility. Be as harmless as doves, but as wise as serpents. We are in a fallen world, and we have an active deceiver who most certainly has tried many things to stop this revelation from growing, just as he did everything he could with all the other revelations to stop them from growing and to kill them if possible. I know this is probably new, maybe shocking to some of you, but this is the world we live in. Be careful. I bless you. I pray that future generations will get things better than we did. And I urge you to remember that it's all just scaffolding, that human life cannot not have errors, and that we can learn from them and grow through that learning. Thank you for your time. God bless you.